Hello and welcome back, and today I want to do something of a deep dive into the UNAS software that's included with your UNAS Pro system. I've already done a few videos on this system and I know it does seem like I'm really hammering the point here, but I know there's a lot of users out there, particularly ones moving away from pre-established and long-running NAS brands in the wild, that are thinking about moving over to this platform and just kind of want to see how things work. And in my other videos I kind of skipped over different screens, this kind of single panel user interface here that you can see on my web browser. I'm going to go through pretty much everything. This video is going to be long and frankly it's going to be dull, but if you are looking to see exactly what this software is made up of, what you can and can't do, this might be the video for you. So this is a system I've formatted several times during the course of its development for the reviews and the evaluation as well. This is the main page that you see when you log into the device for the first time. Logging in, you can access remotely. That's what I'm doing right now via my UniFI site manager account, but you can access it kind of locally if you choose on a local area network. Now, right now at the time of recording, the UniFI identity application can be used to kind of verify credentials and access on a local system for security means, but an update that's coming, I'm told, in the next few days will add local SMB mounting tools to allow you to immediately attach the drive to your local file manager. And that might be something I'll add later into this video if that feature is accessible and usable and stable in time for this video. But if it's not included, that is why. Now, you can see here from the desktop I've logged in, I've got a super user account. On the top left here, we've got all of our storage. We can zoom in a little bit there. When we tap on that bar, it gives us real-time information about the temperature of our system. Right now, I've just come off the back of some heavy read-write testing for another video, and that's why the temperature's gone up ever so slightly. But that is the core system temperature, not the individual storage temperature there. Got a bit more information about it, and of course resource utilization, and that is a quad-core ARM-based processor, ARM-based processor for those of you that are going to correct, and there is 8 gig of memory inside, and I'm currently using 31% of that. If we go into the storage manager, we're able to see a little bit more about the total available storage. I answered a number of these questions in previous videos, but just to clarify, number one, you don't have to fully populate this device, you can partially populate it. If you install a new drive gradually over time, it will absorb that storage into the single storage pool. There's only one storage pool available on this. You can enable 1 or 2 disk failure protection, but at the time of launch, this is not a RAID 6. This is more like a RAID 10 in terms of that storage protection. RAID 6 apparently is being added in later on. RAID 10 does give you good performance, I will say, but you do kind of have half your storage. It's not ideal. Also, you can use non-UniFi branded drives. So the UniFi branded drives, as you can see here, this is one of their official drives. This utilizes a Toshiba MG. That's an enterprise grade 8 terabyte drive. But as you can see, I have installed other drives inside, like the WD-80B here. But more importantly, I've installed a 24 TB drive here to give you some idea about mixed drive support. So you can use other drives, but I will say this is a traditional RAID. This isn't a flexible RAID. If you put mixed drives inside, it will classify every single drive as the lowest available capacity there. And of course, as mentioned earlier, this is a single pool. So if you were thinking of installing, for example, 4 SSDs perhaps, SATA SSDs for one pool to be used as hot data, and perhaps 3 larger hard drives and a 1 disk redundancy for use as a drive, just standard cold or archival storage, you can't do that currently. It's a single pool for all of your storage. If you install a new drive, immediately absorbed as mentioned, but also you can have a hot spare so that a spare drive is always sitting there in the background ready to pick up the slack in the event of a RAID failure, and that drive will go in and replace that and rebuild the RAID using the available parity. Now, heading back here onto that desktop, as mentioned earlier on, let's actually deep dive this a little bit. At the top left, we've got our backup progress. As mentioned, I've already formatted this system several times, and consequently, we've only got one successful backup task there because the number of times I've refreshed this system for different reviews and evaluation, a lot of my historical data is gone. If you want to create a task, you can click that Create Task there, and you can choose which part of the data you want to back up. So, for example, if I go for NAS Compare Share there, select OK, that's one of my drives, and I'll get to that later on. Give it a test, give it a name, so I'm going to call this Test Backup. actually spell backup correctly if I can reach over the mic for my keyboard. And there we go. So we've selected a drive, and we can select multiple drives for that backup if we choose to, and then you choose whether you want to back up to another UNAS. Unfortunately, I don't have another UNAS right now, which is a bit of a shame. I presume, again, this is an assumption here because I haven't got one available. I presume it will either find one on the local area network if it can, or if you have multiple UNAS devices bound to your site manager account, I'm hoping that means that a UNAS to UNAS remote backup over the internet is possible here. But again, this is an assumption. I haven't got a device here to test that out. What isn't an assumption is I do know that you can find a NAS on the local area network if you choose to. As you can see here, if I go in and enter these credentials and log in and connect to a NAS on my local area network, it will try to find the device, but of course, right now, connection delays because I'm accessing this device remotely here. Also, a NAS that I'm trying to access, if we go down here, we try and find it on my list of local NAS devices, we're able to see that IP 122, and it looks like we're on a different subnet there anyway. But if you had the correct credentials, this is where you would put them. And then, of course, you have got a cloud backup, which again, you would use to link to your cloud account. So this is when you use that QR code, you open this here to log in to your Google account, scan that code, enter the code there in that window, and it will synchronize between those two. Again, we go into a lot more detail on this in my full review, which I recommend you check out, where we tested 2 of these and actually have active backups in place. But after that, those backups will allow you to not only select individual destination folders on the cloud, but you can choose ruling. So whether you want to replace them every time or create a fresh directory every time, you can do that. And of course, you've got scheduled backups as well. There isn't any rules, unfortunately, for if things go wrong, such as failure responses, such as if this fails to retry or send an alert immediately. They would have been nice, but maybe that'll be something they add down the line. Back on the desktop here, and we go on that single glass dashboard there, we can see next up file services. Now, file services are obviously the means with which you are going to access this system. As you can see, I've got 2 different connections on this system. I've actually got the SFP local connection, that 10G, and that copper-based Ethernet connection as well. And it provides you with the addresses for local SMB and, of course, Mac connectivity as well. If you are a Mac user, you can use some of this to bridge the connection for Apple Time Machine backups directly onto the system. Again, you will have to use one of their listed guides to walk you through it right now. And I will say a lot of the resources, as you can see there, are still currently held back, are still being rolled out gradually over time for this system. As right now at the time of recording, although it's been announced, formal delivery of this device, and I believe is about 4 or 5 days from now, where it will be available to purchase, and a lot of these assets will be live at that point. Finally, at the bottom there, we've got those encrypted drive option there. That'll allow you to create an encrypted shared drive area where, much like the other shared drives, you can utilize this on a local area network or utilize this drive remotely. But the point is it will be encrypted and it can be locked whenever the system is restarted, perhaps for an update, or you can manually lock it if you choose to, and you can disable that encryption over time if you choose. You can even select and add further drives to this if you choose to. It's a nice little system there. I kind of like that you can encrypt this out the gate, but as mentioned in my previous video, it's not really organically knitted here into the drive window, or I kind of would have liked to have seen that more. Now, moving back to the main desktop, we can look at the other options. Next up, recent sign-ins here at the bottom left. If we dig in, we can find out more information from the notification section about what's been going on with the system, who's accessing it, how and when. But what you can also do, going back into that section there, is we can talk a little bit more about creating users. Now, if we go into the user section here, we can choose to, if we wish, not only view the credentials and rules of any active user on the system, but we can go ahead and add a new user if we choose to. As we can see, these are our currently listed users, myself and Eddie playing around with this system. But let's go ahead and create ourselves a new user. This will be an admin user, and this is where we enter their email address, or we can go with email@email.com. It will then ping that user remotely, or you can choose to only give them local access and create a local access account. So we can go ahead with local and give it a password, and it needs more characters. and that will allow you to create a local access account and also save how much power this admin user has. You can actually restrict them at later points, but for now we can go ahead and create that user if we choose to. It's telling me I need to create a more difficult account, and boom, there you go. We've created that new local only account if we choose to. Next up, average Joe Blogs user. So now we can go ahead and create an average user here. Give them a name, and then from there give them further information that's more relevant to you or your business, and then from there select which drive they have access to. The system will automatically offer to create a drive for this user if you wish, so out the gate they've all got their own storage area, or again you can assign them access to other storage areas as well as change the level of access that that user has, ranging from read only to read and write, or completely zero access to those if you choose to do that. And as you can see, we go ahead and it's created that user, but it will also send an email to that user just to give them a heads up and allow that access point. Earlier on, I mentioned that client tool, Identity. Identity allows you to verify and control client-to-client, point-to-point access to UniFI systems, not just the NAS. You can go ahead and create an identity endpoint via that client, utilizing a lot of these credentials you've created, and then hardwire in even more. So if you want to use directory integration with Microsoft and Google services, you can do that. You will need all of your relevant domain information, but you can assign that there. You can also choose the level of access they've got, and I'm sure this is going to become more evolved over time, or you can add in an existing workspace if you've created it there. Most of this can be managed easily on the fly, and again, as mentioned, you can create new roles that can be wide sweeping across the system. So for example, if I create a new admin role called sub-admin, and this sub-admin will have full access to the storage drive, but no access to the controls of the system, I can do that. And now I've created a new user role, and I can apply that user role to different users if I choose to. So we can go for a no access role, which may sound pointless, but we can have a no access role which allows you to view the configuration but none of the data. You can do that easily and create those roles and suit them to different users on the system. All of it lovely and straightforward. Once again, returning to that single pane of glass user interface, we can take a look at snapshots. We've already talked about backups, which are far more integral. Snapshots are kind of like a restoration tool. I wouldn't consider them a backup. They just simply aren't. They are a means of turning back time or a previous version of a file or files/folder, but they have an inherent weakness in that if you delete or lose snapshots between two particular snapshots in the past, they make all of the ones afterwards invalid. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at some of the historical stuff here inside these drives. If we go ahead and go for, say, this one here, this has got some data inside, and move into this, and we have a little look, we've got set up a snapshot. So I can go ahead and create a snapshot system here. I'm going to create a bunch of snapshots. Imagine every single time I went ahead and added a folder in between one of these snapshots. If I lose one of these in the middle, or delete it or overwrite it, all of the ones behind it are no longer any use to you. Now, that means if you want to restore the past on a particular drive, that's going to require you to kind of be very selective. Luckily, when it comes to versions of snapshots, what you can do is see the difference in past snapshots. So this allows you to look at historical pasts, snapshots that have happened on your data, and then choose whether you want to restore them easily. You click restore, you restore the backup, or the backup of that snapshot, but you can also choose to create another snapshot in case it doesn't save things and you want to revert back to it. Nice and straightforward, all built in as you see there. You even lock a specific snapshot if you choose to. Why would you do that? Nice and simple, to ensure that that one is never accidentally deleted or overwritten, which again would stop you from restoring snapshots at a certain point. Which brings us now to talking about the drive area itself. Now, all of these are drives that you're accessing here on a file folder breadcrumb level via the web browser. As mentioned earlier on, you've got the likes of encryption, you've got snapshots, and you've got remote backups that could be set up on all of those shared storage areas.
Via this single pane here, you can access and view every single shared drive for all of your individual users if you're an admin. On the the right-hand panel, find out more information about the storage being utilized, find out the rules that you've set up for those snapshots, and finally there at the end, you can adapt and change some of the settings such as who has got access and how much of the drive usage is happening across the whole system. You can even limit the growth of that storage drive if you choose to on less priority folders being created over time. Creating a new shared folder is really straightforward. Going to the top, select a name, so in this case, new share 1. Cannot use a number or use spaces, what an annoyance. And then from there, again, storage limit, add users, and then later on you can add those snapshot rules as you choose them. If we go into a folder that's got some data inside, we'll go for this one here, the shared drive example. Double clicking one of those will show you the item in the web browser. Again, depending on the scale of it and your internet connection, what a horrible picture of me that is, but you can upload those photos easily by uploading them. I'll show you in a moment. But when you do access a file, you can access historical information, not a lot of the metadata. I hope that changes over time, but rename it, duplicate it, move it around the system, or download it locally or delete it. If you choose to, right click it, and you can choose to create a share link. Now again, depending on how you intend access to be managed on your system, these share rules will differ. Such example, set an expiry link, an access limit, so that's the number of accesses and whether it requires a password or not. So as you can see, I can go ahead and I've created a new share link. From there, I can download a QR code if I wish, or I can copy the QR code, or I can go ahead and adapt some of the settings of that share at any time. You can search most of the shared areas very, very easily here. Ignore the amber. I'm just keeping the wider network here largely inaccessible during the course of this UNAS stuff. If you choose to, going into a folder, uploading files, you can drag and drop into the window or select the add there and you can choose to upload an entire folder, upload an entire just a file, or create a brand new folder if you choose to. And that will just dump it directly into that directory there. And again, same share, duplicate, download, all the rest of the rules still apply there. It's all fairly responsive stuff. And keep in mind again, that memory utilization there is sitting at around coming up on a third there, I'd say. So we are still looking at well between 2 to 3 gig of memory utilization. And that's key. Clearly, this system is utilizing a little bit more memory than it needs to a point in order to keep things smooth. Again, that's not unusual, and it will probably flush the cache when it needs to when the excess memory goes up a certain point. But overall, that user interface here does feel very responsive, even when accessing it via a frankly limited internet connection. To put that into perspective, I've made a point of ensuring that when I'm accessing this, I'm doing it on a very low internet connection there. I'm not going to say it's a slow speed, because that's good enough, 100 megabit there, and the upload isn't going to be too bad. But this is not exactly groundbreaking internet connectivity here in order for me to be accessing this system remotely over the internet. So, moving forward, if we go into the settings menu, we can take a little look at some of the settings we may have missed. We've already looked at the backup task there, and again, we can create a new task very easily or view existing tasks as and when they're running, and we can adapt them very easily there. Next up, snapshots. We've got an overview there of the active snapshots that have happened and ones that still need to happen, all listed nice and easy for us to see. We can manage some of the shared links that we've created over time, how many times they've been accessed, adapting them if we choose to, and change them on the fly via that single window. Next up, we can adapt some of those services that we can choose if we want to modify these a little bit, and again, if we want to change some of the encrypted drive settings very easily there. And finally, managing how notifications are sent to the system and which notifications are visible are all accessible here. And you can set what's important to you and more importantly what isn't, so you don't get bombarded very easily there. Finally, the control plane. The control plane is where you can largely manage everything on the system. So for example, if you want to check on release notifications and what exactly is available to update right now, you can change which release channel from release candidates to early access and official that you want to use. Moreover, if you want the NAS to be on the latest updates, but you want the apps to not be, or vice versa in case you don't want the system to restart, you can set that up quite easily. Again, all of the management of these things are done very fluidly and easily within these small windows. I'm not going to call this as dynamic as DSM or QTS, but as you're seeing from this walkthrough, I hope, there's a lot to like here. Now, backups here apply to system configuration backups. So you can have the system automatically back up the system configuration regularly to your UI.com account. In other words, you will need to sign this system up to UI.com for free to have an account with UniFi, I should say, in order to synchronize your system configuration to restore later. So, for example, choose to ad hoc back it up to the cloud, and if you need to reset your configuration to file shares, active users, IPs and configuration, you can do all of that there and even back it up locally if you choose to, and then you can restore it whenever you need to, and the restoration happens during the initialization of the system. Storage we've already dipped into there, going through what we can and can't do. And on the console, we can change some of the main other configurations we've missed. This is the page that I think is going to see serious improvement in the next 6 to 12 months. There's a lot of things missing from what the UNAS Pro on a hardware configuration and control level can do compared with its alternatives. So, for example, setting the time and the name, all fair and well. Edit the location, makes sense. UniFi do that with a lot of their systems. But controlling the LED and the LCM on the front of the system compared with trying to control perhaps hard drive hibernation or system scheduled on and off is something they're missing here, and hopefully this logic will extend to those later on. If you want to attach email services that are quite unique, whether you want to use your UI mail server or a custom mail server for notifications and alerts, you can set it up there. Again, you can set it all up. You just need to put in all the relevant information or just rely on your UI.com account. If you are in communication with the UI and you need help or troubleshooting, you can download a file report that provides all the configured information about your UNAS Pro that can be used for that support and troubleshooting with Ubiquiti and UniFi. And again, most of the options of configuration are there. If you want to add an SSL certificate, you can go ahead and do that, or the TLS certificate, sorry. You can upload an existing one, let's encrypt, etc., etc. If you are accessing locally, that's going to be less of a bother, but remotely you might quite like that. But again, remember, you are still already accessing this remotely via the UI.com relay. Again, remote access is possible, but do keep in mind with a remote access that you do need to be using UI.com account services in order to do that. You currently can't use things like Tailscale in order to access the UNAS Pro remotely. Again, analytics, usual stuff, whether you want to submit anonymous statistics and analytics to UI.com for improvement. And of course, SSH. If you want to access the command line of this system, you can do that. So for example, enable SSH, you've got to create an account for it. So you're going to have to create a local local SSH authorized password to get in. But once you do that, you will be able to play around with the system on a command line level in the background with something like PuTTY or Windows PowerShell. But keep in mind when doing that you are doing, kind of dangerous stuff if you don't know what you're doing, so I don't recommend doing that, but it's nice to know they've added that option there at least. And finally, again, restart the system, shut down the system. Lots of these can be configured, by the way, on the front LCD panel. Transfer ownership will allow you to change who owns the system, and that's going to be quite good for multi-site deployment, factory reset, and a one-click glance at all the system information on the system you are running right now. Quite useful, and that's really it. Ending right now on the network configuration settings there. A little bit basic. There's no configuration of jumbo frames or MTU, which are arguably on a 7 hard drive 10G single port box may not be that useful, but still you can do the configuration and dedicated configuration on each of the individual ports if you choose to. But that's really it. This has been my full overview of the UNAS Pro operating system here via the web browser for those that wanted to know. Again, I fully expect massive changes on this in the next 6 to 12 months, and hopefully we'll see things like container deployment, deployment of the Protect application, or maybe even the UniFi controller inside this system. But if you've enjoyed this video, let me know.
If you're interested in getting hold of a UNAS Pro, please use the link in the description to get hold of one, but only do that if this video has helped. Using that link will result in a small commission to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares. It's genuinely just us here doing this, and it really helps us keep doing what we do. Otherwise, we've done other videos on this system comparing it against the likes of Synology and QNAP, as well as a detailed review and a much shorter pros and cons review, which should be linked below. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.